genes. Genetics are also your weakness. So your genes are something that you're born with, something that cannot be changed. So learning about what you are naturally adept at can be really helpful. It's not just true for physical characteristics, it's also true for mental characteristics. Like he says, if you were to ask, the writer of this book says, if you were to ask me about habits and all of that, I would be really good at it. But if you were to come to me and ask me to tell you about something random like boats, like I wouldn't be good at that. And so it talks about how this kind of reminds me, just me being a teacher, how as people, we have things that we're good at and we don't want that to hold us back. But it's important to be really honest about what we're naturally adept at, what we're naturally good at, and the areas that we need to work on. And that just comes with like the honesty of doing this whole process, because this whole process is honest. You know, people can't even start with this book and this process if they're not willing to admit the things that they're doing that are not working for them, you know. So this is just kind of the next step in it. So in short, genes do not determine your destiny, but they do determine the areas of opportunity. So getting to know yourself and then doing this type of reflection can be really great. Once you learn more about your personality, you can learn more about why you are good or not good at certain habits, why certain things are harder for you, and that kind of thing. And I think that it's really nice because it kind of takes some of the pressure off of just like, you're just not doing it. Like, just do it. You know what I mean? And then as we've gone through this book, talking about all of the different steps of a habit, talking about all the different like ways to make it obvious, the ways to make it, you know, you don't know all that until you've done this work. And so don't be so hard on yourself, I guess is my point, that there's a lot more to it, down to your genes, down to your environment, which we've talked about how important it is to set up your environment. I think I'm actually going to get into that a little bit more. But bundled together, your unique cluster of genetic traits predispose you to a particular personality. Your personality is the set of characteristics that is consistent from one situation to the next. The most proven scientific analysis of personality trait is known as the Big Five. This is really cool. You guys should think about this for yourself. It breaks it into 5 spectrums of behavior. Hold on. Did you see me take a break while you were talking? Because I went to go make my coffee. Okay. So number 1, how open are you to an experience? You could either be curious and inventive on one end, or you're cautious and consistent on the other. So ask yourself, when it comes to a new experience, do you tend to be more curious and inventive? Are you down to try something new? Or do you kind of go more on the side of being like really cautious and consistent, and you don't really want to try new things that readily, you know? That's part of your personality. Did you know? But you can change it if you want to. Number 2 is conscientious. How organized and efficient are you? So on one side, it's organized and efficient, and the other side, it's easygoing and spontaneous. I know that this is a big one for me because I'm not organized and efficient, and I'm always going an uphill battle on this one because I am more like go with the flow. I'm actually kind of got more toward the middle as I've gotten older, but I'm so easygoing and spontaneous that like I didn't care about the small things, which is just something that I battle with personally in my personality. It makes it harder for me because I'm going uphill. If you're somebody who's just more naturally organized, like my dad, all of this was so easy for him. He never had to read a book. He never had to train his mind. Like his mind was just naturally doing these habits. Like he can't not do these small things. And I think that that's a big one for him. Number 3 is extroversion. Are you outgoing and energetic, or are you more solitary and reserved? Introvert versus extrovert, or you could be somewhere in the middle. You guys want to know something crazy? In this chapter, it said that they can tell if babies are introverts or extroverts when they're in the hospital. So when they have all the babies in the beds, they'll play the music, loud music, and some babies will roll over and turn their body toward the music, and some babies will roll their bodies away and turn away from the music. And then they tracked those people as they got older, and they found that the kids that were going towards the music as little teeny tiny babies, brand new, turned into extroverts more likely. And then the babies that were turning away from the sound were more likely to turn into introverts. So that can be something that is so genetic. It's in your genes, so like, don't be too hard on yourself. You've been that way since you were born. But like I said, you can make a conscious effort to change these things and grow. Number 4 is agreeableness. Are you friendly and compassionate, or are you challenging and detached? How agreeable are you when it comes to how you communicate or just like interact with other people? That can have a big impact on your personality. And then number 5 is neuroticism. Neuroticism, I think that's how you say it. Either you're anxious and sensitive on one side, or you're confident, calm, and stable on the other. This is a big one for me. This is a big one that I put a lot of energy into trying to control and change. Like there's times where I'm so anxious and sensitive and the littlest thing can hurt my feelings, but there's times when I'm calm and confident. So getting myself to this side is like a really big goal for me in my own personal development of my personality, because it can be hard if you're sensitive and anxious a lot, but sometimes you can't change it or control it. So all of these characteristics have biologic underpinnings, but our habits are not solely determined by our personalities, but our genes definitely nudge us in a direction or one way or the other. So these are really good things to reflect on as we're doing this. And I just love this chapter because I love learning about like the science behind why people are the way they are, how our brains work, how we're just predispositioned. I just think it's so interesting. All right. I could talk forever, but I think that I should move to the next chapter. So let me go over the summary for that one, and then I'll go to the next chapter, which is 19. We have 2 more. So the secret to maximizing your odds of success is to choose the right field of competition, choosing an area where you can be successful. You're going to be more successful in, I just use sports as an example, something that you're adept at. Like I said in the beginning, like Michael Phelps, if he had tried to go out and become a runner, even though he's an Olympic athlete, he would not have been an Olympic runner because the top of his body was long and the bottom of his body is short. Pick the right habits and progress is easy. Pick the wrong habits and your life is a struggle. So maybe you're trying a hard habit in the beginning, and maybe you need to take a step back and choose an easier one first, because like Ashley said, we're stacking these habits. There's so many ways that as you go through this book, at first it's just like the first level and they build on each other, and as you become stronger in your own like just, I don't know, determination, you're more discipline, you can start adding harder habits on. And I also think that choosing the habits that are like stopping you from doing the better habits. Like I'm thinking about the dishes. Like if you always have dishes, this is me too, in the way, if you're not smart about moving them into the dishwasher when you need to, you're not going to be able to do them at the end of the night quickly like you want to. For me, it stops me from cooking or wanting to cook some nights because I'm like, oh my God, before I cook, I have to do this. So finding which habits are stopping you from doing better at the other habits is important. Picking and choosing them in the right order, Habits are easier when they align with your natural abilities, so choose the habits that suit you best. Play a game that favors your strengths. If you can't find a game that favors you, create one. And genes do not eliminate the need for hard work. They clarify it and they tell us what to work hard on. So you can use your genes to tell you what you're already good at and lean into it, but you can also use them to tell you like what you need to intentionally work on so that you can reach your goals and, change in the ways you need to change. 19, the Goldilocks Rule, how to stay motivated in life and work. So this chapter talks about the Goldilocks Rule. The Goldilocks Rule states that humans experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are right on the edge of their current abilities. When I was reading this chapter, I totally related to it because as a teacher, we talk about mastery, and this is talking about mastery. Starting a habit in the beginning, you're not a master at it. It's not so natural. You're putting a lot of energy into it. And you always want to find something that is right outside of your comfort zone, right outside of your ability. So I imagine it like some circles, like a middle circle, that's where you currently are. An outside circle is where you could reach, but the farthest out circle, you can't get there yet. If you try to reach all the way out to the farthest out circle, you're setting yourself up for failure because you need to find something that's right outside of what you can currently do. As you gain mastery and confidence in this, you'll be working your way out. And then this is something that I use as a teacher when it comes to learning with students too. If you're trying to teach kids something, you can't reach all the way to the outside circle when their brains haven't made that connection yet. And it's just so interesting to see us as adults actually using the same thing that we use on kids to help them. You can't ask them to do a task, even as a mom, that's way outside of their ability if you haven't taught them something that's just kind of outside of what they've done, kind of, and then you can get them to something harder. The greatest threat for success is not failure, but boredom, because a lot of time these things can start to feel tedious and boring. And I relate that to myself too, like when it comes to maybe like my own struggle with alcohol, right? I also was listening to a podcast yesterday that was talking about addiction, and it was talking about one of the main things that cause people to fall back into their old habits is boredom more than anything, because sometimes, the right path, it's not full of parties and all that good stuff. And so I also think that that's why it's important to have these accountability buddies, because if you're not doing it on your own, then it's a lot more fun, even if it's the boring stuff. Like, I don't think this is boring, but it could feel boring to some people. Maybe I would have felt like it was boring in the beginning. As habits become routines, they get less interesting and less satisfying. So we're going to go on in the next chapter to talk about kind of the downside of habits, but this is the good part, but also the bad part. As it goes into that automatic part of your brain, you're not so there, you're doing it more naturally, you're doing it without thinking, and it becomes more boring in a way because you're not fully there. And that's like part of the good part of it, is that you can start to put these things that used to be hard for you in your automatic part of your brain. You're no longer putting your thought and energy into forming that habit because you already have it, you're already doing it. But it's dangerous because as it goes back there, you're not consciously thinking about it. It's easy to get bored. It's easy to kind of, not have all of that presence of mind on that action any longer. Anyone can work hard when they feel motivated. You guys, this is just like something that we talk about all the time outside of this book, but action breeds motivation. You can't wait for the motivation. It's my biggest, honestly, still my biggest downfall at this moment. It's about the ability to keep going when the work isn't exciting that makes the difference. So it's like the grit, if you're looking for something to help keep you through, it's the grit. It's being able to work through hard things for periods of time without giving up or getting bored or whatever. Professionals stick to a schedule. Amateurs let life get in the way. You're a professional or an amateur. And that's just kind of the outline of that chapter. And then I'm going to go into 20, which is the last chapter. It's called The Downside of Creating Good Habits. And then this kind of actually connects to what Ashley was talking about in the beginning, which is the importance of reflection. Because it tells a little story about sports, and it talks about how without taking the time, so it's talking about the Lakers in 1985 to 1986. And it's talking about how they were trying to improve. It kind of goes back to the idea, if you guys listened to our very first session, we talked about the bikers who were trying to get better every year. They were doing the, what was it? The biggest bike race in the world, the Grand Prix. Is that true? I hope that's biking. The Tour de France. Yeah. So the German team was trying to get better, and they were trying to make tiny, tiny changes, 1%. They were changing this, they were changing that, they're changing the pillows, they're changing the temperatures that they sleep in. They're changing these little teeny tiny things to try to get the best that they can. And then it says that the Lakers were also doing something similar to this that year, but they were using a point system to track the habits, and they were getting more points for doing things that were hard, like letting someone hit you when you know they're going to get the foul and they're going to knock you over. If you're willing to stand there and take that hit, you're going to get 10 points as opposed to like 1 point for something easy, making the basket or whatever. The point was not the points. The point was not the point. The goal was to have a number to track how well they did during that period, to hold themselves accountable so that they're actually stopping and reflecting with a point system every day. Ashley, you said you're using something like this. You talked about getting to the end of the day and looking at the things that you've done. And so you're reflecting a little bit every day. And he goes on to talk about the importance of reflecting at the end of the year, which is so perfect because we're going to do this. I want to use this little activity because we're having our call on the 28th where we're going to go over our end of the year little reflections. And he talks about how important it is at the end of the year to reflect and review. Reflection and review enables the long-term improvement of all habits because it makes you aware of your mistakes and it helps you consider possible paths for improvement. Without reflection, we can make excuses, create realizations, and lie to ourselves. We have no process to determine whether we are performing better or worse compared to yesterday. So without your list, Ashley, it's all great, but you wouldn't really, be keeping yourself accountable through time to perform them. So top performers in all fields engage in various types of reflection and review. The process doesn't have to be complex. They talk about how lots of different people in this world who are successful do this. They talk about athletes, they talk about comedians, they talk about, I don't know if I'm going to go through all of these, but there's a lot of great examples throughout the whole book. They say that there's like executives and investors who keep a decision journal and they record the major decisions they make each week, why they made them and what they expect the outcome to be, so that they can go back and look and see how the decisions they made affected the outcome and the success of that moment. He says that he personally employs two primary modes of reflection and review. Each December, he performs an annual review, which is what I think we should do a little bit of, which is where I reflect on the previous year. I tally my habits for the year by counting up how many articles I published. Well, we maybe haven't published articles, but how many workouts I put in, how many new places I visited, and more. And then I reflect on my progress or lack of by answering these three questions. What went well this year? What didn't go so well? And what did I learn? And then when 6 months later comes around in summer, then he conducts an integrity report where he goes back and he makes sure that he's keeping himself on track for those things so that he checks back in 6 months. He uses the time to revisit his core values and consider whether he's been living in accordance with them. So I think core values are also awesome. He asks these three questions. What are my core values that drive my life and work? Which is something I think we could answer together too on Tuesday. That's tomorrow? How am I living and working with integrity right now? And how can I set higher standards in the future? So it's just a few hours per year. Reflection can bring a sense of perspective. Daily habits are powerful because of how they compound, how they work together and add on top of one another. But worrying too much about daily choices is like looking at yourself in the mirror from an inch away. If you're always just picking every single moment and you don't take the time to step back and actually reflect on how you've done in the big picture, you take away your own reward. You deserve to look out from the big picture and be like, oh, wow, I actually have done really good on this. Last year, I wasn't doing this. And this year, I've actually been doing pretty good on it. But also the opposite, being honest and being like, if this isn't working for me, if I've been trying this habit for 6 months and I still don't have it, then there's a reason why. It's not my own failure. I need to go back. It's one of the 4 steps of the habit, or it's not attractive enough for me, or it's not obvious enough, or it's just not one that I'm ready for yet. It's not close enough in this inner ring of my own comfort zone. You know what I'm saying? So you need to stop. And if something's not working for you, we're not putting energy into that anymore. Let's be smart about our time and energy and find something that's going to work for us. Then it talks about how to break the beliefs that hold you back, guys. A lot of us hold ourselves back. In the beginning, repeating a habit is essential because we're trying to build our desired identity, like Ashley's talking about. This whole goal is to build the identity. Once we feel like we are that person that does it, once we really are the person that does it, I've done that. I'm no longer trying to convince myself. It's not the imposter feeling anymore. It's like no, I've done, and I am. You know what I mean? I am that person now. As you latch onto a new identity, however, those beliefs can hold you back from your next level of growth, though. So it's kind of both sides of the wheel. When working against you, your identity creates a kind of pride that encourages you to deny your weak spots and prevent you from truly growing. So you can't let your identity become too attached to something that you become prideful around it, and you can no longer start to notice the things that you aren't doing right or that aren't working for you. So they give some example. The more sacred an idea is to us, that is, the more deeply it's tied to our identity, the stronger we will defend it against criticism. So they give the example of a school teacher who has been teaching for 30 years and starts to ignore innovative teaching methods, new research, because the way that they've done it has always worked. I've met a million teachers like that, you guys. They just are so wrapped up in who they are that they don't realize that there's new ways to reach the kids that, we didn't know about 30 years ago. We have to learn new things. How about a manager who's committed to doing things his way? They won't take in new ideas from their new staff because the way that they've done it has worked. You know those type of people who have been so tied to that identity that they can't grow beyond it. Like, this is literally my father. He's so good at habits. He's perfect. But the second anything goes outside of it that he doesn't align anymore, he shuts down. He can't take that criticism. He is so attached to that identity that it's just like, there's no more growth. So one solution is to avoid making a single aspect of your identity an overwhelming portion of who you are. So keep your identity small. The more you're tied to a single belief to define you, the less capable you are of adapting. And I've talked about this on my page. I don't know if we talked about it in this, but the idea of an athlete. If you're an athlete and you're so tied to the identity of being an athlete, once you're no longer an athlete, you feel like you've lost your identity. It's what I went through. I had all these great habits as an athlete. I literally lived my whole life. And the second I wasn't an athlete, I was like, oh, I can drop all these habits. It was great. I put 20 years of my life into this, moving on, and my thinking should have been switched from I'm an athlete to I'm the type of person who's mentally tough and loves a physical challenge. That goes beyond that one identity of being an athlete. And I feel like I've gotten back into that. I've realized how I was mentally tough as an athlete, although I'm not like racing people on my feet anymore. I can take that aspect into my own life now. I'm a great soldier can transform into I'm the type of person who's disciplined, reliable, and great on a team. So that when you're no longer a soldier, you can still bring those aspects of your identity into your new life. I'm a CEO translates into I'm the type of person who builds and creates things. So even if you lose that role or job title, you still know that no matter what you go into, you bring that confidence. And you guys will see successful people talk about this all the time. They started that business and then it either worked out or didn't. They sold it. They moved on to another business. This happened to them in their life. They lost everything, but they said, I have these skills. I have these habits. I know that no matter what I go into, what environment, what industry, I bring these skills. This is my identity. It's not tied to that one role. Like, I'm going to be successful. I have that confidence no matter what happens. There's a poem in it. This is a quote from Tao Te Ching, and it encapsulates the ideas of perfectly. Men are born soft and supple. Dead, they are stiff and hard. Plants are born tender and pliable. Dead, they are brittle and dry. Thus, whoever is stiff and inflexible is a discipline of death. Whoever is soft and yielding is a discipline of life. The hard and stiff will be broken. The soft and supple will prevail. Cool. I love that. Habit delivers numerous benefits, but the downside is they can lock us into a previous pattern of thinking, even when the world around us is shifting. Remember that everything is impermanent. Life is constantly changing, so it's important to periodically check in to see if your old habits and beliefs are serving. A lack of self-awareness is poison. Reflection and review is the antidote. It goes into the conclusion. The conclusion really just goes over everything that we have already been into. And then it gives you some ideas about what you should read next. And then it also has little life lessons that goes with the 4 laws. So this is cool. You could go into like these different life lessons. It talks about how awareness needs to come before desire. Happiness is simply the absence of desire. It is the idea of pleasure that we chase. So it's just talking about how what he's went through in this book relate to other life lessons. Emotions drive behavior. Being curious is better than being smart. These are all really cool. And then it talks about how to apply these ideas. So there's a chapter, you can download it online, about how to apply these ideas to business. which I'm pretty sure that we're going to kind of build off of. And we'll do a little call talking about how these habits can relate to our Monate business. And then the next one says how these ideas apply to parenting, which Ashley, I'm sure you've been thinking about in your head this whole time as you've gone through this, but I'm pretty sure that maybe you and Steph want to take that one and talk a little bit about how these habits relate to kids. I mean, I'm a teacher too, so I feel like I see how this relates to kids all the time because I'm around them too. And yeah, that's the end of my chapters, and that's the end of our book. We did it.
Oh man, that was so good. So we learned, habits are something that we can create and that we can change. You just have to make them obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. Those are the 4 laws. So as long as you remember those, and if you just keep going back towards those and know that it's a cue, craving, response, reward type of behavior, you're going to get very, very far. And start off, like I said at the beginning of this call, very small. Start with 2 minutes. Start with putting your shoes closer to the door at the night. Start with maybe just doing the dishes before you do something else. Little bit goes a long way. So thank you so much for joining us on this, and I'm excited for the next book. And if you're curious about the book that we're going to be reading, or if you want to hop on any of our Zoom calls or just in our chats, let us know. We would love to help you guys out with getting the information and also just bettering your mindset and your life, all that good stuff. So I'll talk to y'all later. Thanks, Hannah.